Hey witches, it's Lee and this is Doing a Magical Thing, and I thought I'd have a little chat about books. It's one of my favourite things about witchcraft is getting into a nice juicy witchy book, but you know, not all books are created equal, and to prevent yourself losing any kind of investment of time or money into any sort of tome, there's a couple of options. For the older workings, you can look at the library to rent them out. Maybe a friend has them, maybe there's a group online who does, you know, witchy book exchanges, that kind of thing. And one of my favourite options is to have a look at the ebook version if there is one, and download the free sample that is often offered. And this will give you an idea, the first sort of chapter or so, of really the author's tone, of the theme, whether you're going to really vibe with that. So that's my own sort of things that I've been doing to help prevent, you know, losing any kind of money, because books cost a great deal of money, especially the more academic versions, and you know, not everyone's got that to spare on things that are potentially a wasted investment, so to speak. Now, does this mean you have to agree with everything that every book says that you read? No. Do I agree with every book that I'm going to recommend to you today? No, not necessarily. Not every word on every page, but enough that I have found it helpful in my craft, and enough that I might go back to it time and again. And one of those that I've gone back to for a long time now is Grove Daughter Witchery by Bree Nicgarran. Now, I particularly like this book because it addresses straight from the off that you don't need to be anything particular to be a witch. You just are a witch if you want to be, and you want to do the witchy things, then that is what you are. But it also gives you some really decent practical advice on how to actually go about the practical side of things of witchcraft. What I really like is its openness to change and development. So it says, develop your own set of beliefs, your own set of practices. Understand and accept that these can and will change as you continue to learn. Now that's a good indicator that the information you get in this book is well reasoned, because any book that's claiming to be the absolute truth isn't often the absolute truth. Someone that says, look, hey, this is a perspective and you need to grow from here, grow from this point, is a great option in my opinion. The other thing about this book is that it goes through very practical things like walnut charms, using different, you know, magical powders and such like. And that to me is quite exciting, to get my hands dirty. Now, with this, the other real benefit that I've found from it throughout my sort of witching path is the correspondences section at the back. It's comprehensive and listed by really the subject order, if you like, of why you might need it. And I think it's just such a fantastic breadth of information. So yeah, frequently I will use that in my witching practice. That is kind of my, if you like, that's my practical recommendation to you. My theory recommendation is Magical Power for Beginners by Deborah Lipp. Now this goes into real detail around the how, and for me it was kind of like a mind-bending or mind-expanding book, because it really went into sort of the whole concept of magical time, about connection, and I think, yeah, it's really really wonderful. They actually say here, fortunately, everything is connected to everything else. I say fortunately because it makes magical interconnection so much easier to find. Isn't that true? So yeah, I love this, and I think that really it's one of those books, if you want to have that broad deep dive, then this is certainly worthwhile. What I also love about this is, you know, as they go through the various different exercises, which are very helpful, what I also love is the fact when they reach the comments about different tools and magical tools, they mention about chalices and athames and things like that. These things are quite heavily gendered, and they mention about approaching those tools rather than with that sort of male or female sort of things. You can approach it with a sort of butch femme mindset if you're a sort of more of a queer kind of person. And that I thought was quite cool. You know, it's still binary, but it's progress. So definitely appreciated that inclusion. Generally, yeah, you know, if you're looking to really have some answers, I suppose, to what you're actually doing, then this is my top pick for theory. So theory and practical there. Wrapping it all together in a nice little package is Spellcrafting by Arin-Murphy-Hiscock. Now, they are someone who is not perhaps as hex positive as I am, and that's fine. You know, I understand that they're more of a witch who's seeking a bit more of a kind of more positive path, I suppose. But, I have my own opinions on hexing and cursing, and they have theirs. It doesn't mean that there's nothing to be gained from this. There's a whole lot to be gained from this. And with this book, what it approaches is, and it's kind of for the witch who's been practicing perhaps a little while, wants to incorporate a little bit more to it. And it really, what I find is helpful is that it really goes into certain details on particular things. For instance, planetary hours, and that's something that you can use in your day. If you don't know what planetary hours are, I'm hoping to do a video on it in the future. But essentially, you separate the day into 12 hours. There's a planet assigned to each of those hours, and then you can work magic with that correspondence to age yourself, really give yourself a bit of a boost. So yeah, fantastic in terms of its detail on the actual spellcrafting side of things. And yeah, do I agree with their ethics opinions? Not necessarily, but I do value their information, and I also value their focus on research. They mention a couple of primary texts in here that I find particularly useful, and it's important, I found that really helpful to know that they've actually covered those sort of things in their practice. Obviously they've been practicing a whole long time, so that's not surprising in some ways, but nonetheless you'd be surprised. So yeah, good one for bringing it all together. And it does say for the more experienced witch, but I feel like it's for pretty much any witch who wants to oomph up their spell crafting. So very cool there. Now onwards from looking at the kind of planetary hours, perhaps we want to look at other correspondences, and one of the books that I recommend for that is Book of Witchery by Dugan, or Dugan, forgive me if I'm getting the name wrong. And this is a great one for the days of the week. And so rather than just focusing on moon phases, which is perhaps a good way of doing it, gives you a bit more time to work things out when you're focusing on moon phases initially, looking at days a week gives you really correspondences for each moment that you can use and incorporate, whether that's just from colour magic, from the clothes that you wear, whether it's a particular stone or herb. And what I like about this is that it gives you a bit of a kind of overview of each day, like so, and then goes into the nitty-gritty of things with tarot cards for each day, whether it's particular metals or materials or some sort of thing, give you different ideas of stuff to do. Now they focus on deities in various sections, and that's appropriate in this instance because days of the week are named after deities, and so we get that lore there, and it helps really to inform us in what sort of associations each day has. So yeah, I'm not so fussed about the deities in terms of worship for myself, but I appreciate their significance as a correspondence, as an archetype, as all that sort of thing. So yeah, Book of Witchery, helpful. And actually, while we're looking at correspondences and really sort of things to do, we might want to look at practical magic and certain tools, and one of those ones is sigils, so making sigils, and this is a very good book for that. I'm just going to run through the next sort of few briefly, and I definitely think this is worthwhile because it looks at the Austin Osman Spare way of doing sigils. I like that kind of very simple, quick, effective way of doing it. I don't like too sort of flowery sigils. I think that sort of defeats the purpose of it, meaning to be a clear symbol of whatever it is you're trying to really manifest, I suppose. So that's an option. And, runes are another thing that we tend to use, divination of some kind. Tarot is something, that I dip in and out of a little bit. But for me personally, runes are where it's at in terms of divination and pendulums too, but runes especially have been a long-term love of mine. And the book that I'd recommend for that is Rudiments of Rune Lore by Pollington. This is particularly good because it looks at the original poems, and with that, what you have is the actual sort of text for each one in the older language as well, or in the original language too. So very, very helpful, and has his interpretations there too. This avoids a lot of the fluff that came about with runes, and so yeah, I think it's a good one to go to for the actual meanings of the runes, and then you can build your own concepts around those meanings and your own associations if you so wish. And definitely worth looking at. If you're after a more modern sort of take, or rather a more kind of magical take, a more occult take on it, then you might want to look at the book Nordic Runes by Paul Rees-Mountfort, and that's quite a good one for incorporating it into an actual practice. But yeah, very good information in Rudiments of Rune Lore. And from here, another tool that you can use very simply is your breath. Tucklin Penry has written a whole book on magic on the breath and how to use that, and I think it's a fantastic thing to remind us that actually our magic can come just from us, and that the breath is something that is pretty sacred, isn't it? I think it's something that, really, it really reminds us that we have everything that we need. And what I love is their practical advice that you can find them on YouTube. I recommend them quite frequently. They say it's quite possible to cast spells using nothing but our bare hands, and this rather engaging phrase, one of the first things you must believe is that magic is possible and that you can do it. And that's all, what I love about magic is that anyone can do it, and that's kind of what the whole, what doing magical thing is about, So magic on the breath, worthwhile looking at to get some exercises in there around your breath work, thinking about that in a ritual sense. Very, very cool. So while we're doing all this magic, while we're getting ourselves into rituals, perhaps we want to engage in a bit of protection magic, depending on what we're engaging with. But I always think it's worth having a little bit of that in your practice. So one of the books, we're going back to Ellen Dugan, or Dugan again, which is Practical Protection Magic. And the practical is really the key word when it comes to this book, because, what I've found with magical protection books is they can be quite dramatic and a bit sort of like, doom and gloom. And, obviously there are elements of witchcraft that you need to protect yourself from, but I think we can go about it in a common sense sort of fashion. So they do that, and they also mention some quite interesting options and inventive options for protection magic and things like that. They address things like, psychic vampires and such like. And I like that they separate the chapters into elements, and it helps you think about it in a different way. For instance, earth is guarding and reclaiming your power. You could associate that with sort of steadfastness and that sort of thing. So yeah, very cool. So yeah, worthwhile getting, as I say, a less dramatic work, but nonetheless very helpful. Whilst we've protected ourselves from things, we want to interact with certain beings, certain spirits if we dig that. If we don't, that's absolutely fine. But one of the ones that I really value, and I'm very much focused, as you know, around sort of magic of place and space. And one of the ones I really like is traditions of household spirits for information around house spirits, around, genius or genius Loki, the sort of spirits of the land. And Claude Lecouteux is really someone you'll find me recommending quite frequently. They do a lot of great research into pre-Christian, Middle Ages, that sort of stuff, any kind of beliefs that are Northern European or European-ish, and that's quite helpful for a modern witch, because if you're looking for a practice that is open, that you can perhaps incorporate from the past, we don't have to have this whole exoticism going on. We don't have to, appropriate something from somewhere else. What you're thinking with this sort of thing is accessing culture, perhaps if you are someone who's white European, that is or was somewhere before you. And so there are so many things that you can really access that are part of your cultural history, which is really cool, and so we don't need to go about appropriating other cultures. We can have a look at our own for inspiration, but obviously anything that you're looking at, you want to mindfully incorporate. We're not just throwing things in our practice willy-nilly, and this will help you get quite specific on it. It's really helpful for looking at parts of the house, their significance, and that will help you with sort of protection magic and things like that. As you can see, I've been at it for a few times with various different things, and well worth having a look at for some fantastic information. Now, that's the sort of really the theoretical kind of things when it comes to house spirits. This House Witch by Arin-Murphy-Hiscock, who wrote Spellcrafting, this is perhaps more of a how-to version of that, and gives you some sort of practical elements to incorporate. So this is a good sort of modern, if you like, take, or a more specifically witchy take on it, if you want a more modern version. So that's just a sort of idea. It goes through different parts again of the house, and different parts within it in terms of spirituality. I mentioned days of the week, and I mentioned about correspondences and such like, and one of those such correspondences that we use a lot is planets and planetary energies and things, and astrology. Now, astrology can be a bit overwhelming, and one of the books I found that's really helpful for this is Be Your Own Astrologer. Now, it's small but mighty, I've got it, and I thought, I don't know what I'll learn from this necessarily, a little bit here and there, but actually I learned a great deal, and it goes through some, really great detail. So yeah, I highly recommend for getting a good sense of things, including the zodiac, as well as sort of different placements and such like, and elements, and all sorts of stuff. Really, really, really good. And yeah, fantastic colour as well. So yeah, highly recommend. I mentioned before in another video Witch's Garden. This is a gorgeous book and filled with folklore. It's something that's very visual, and I really appreciate that. The quality of the pages is very, very good, and of the richness really of the wonderful images within it. And yeah, fantastic for specifically witchy herbs, lovely woodcuts throughout this rather evocative one here. And yeah, really recommend. So yeah, definitely worth looking out for any kind of folklore that you want to find out about plants, as it says there. So that's a sort of broader witch's garden-y thing, perhaps from a outside looking in kind of perspective. From the inside of things, we have Tucklin Penry again with the magical properties of plants and how to find them. Tucklin often puts a great deal of research into her workings, and I really value this one because it's well categorised. It categorises by things that you might want to do. So if you're seeking to do a particular thing, it will then give you the herbs under that sort of under that kind of heading. And yeah, lots, as you can see, lots and lots of information within it. What I particularly like as well is a couple of the practical guides, and also the glossary of plant names, which has their wonderful Latin names in there too. So helpful if you're looking up a specific species of plant. So yeah, very, very good. Now, in terms of witchcraft books, we've looked at a few that are sort of partly historical, partly not. For really specifically historical academic kind of works, I'd recommend Owen Davies. He's often recommended alongside Ronald Hutton and the works. And yeah, this is one of his books, Grimoires, a history of magical books, or magic books. And this goes into great detail, and with such evocative chapters as that. Isn't that cool? So yeah, I think this one is great for really looking at the history of things. It goes through various different parts of magical history. He's also written a book called Popular Magic, Cunning Folk in English History, and this is very good if you're looking for English magic specifically from the past, folklore, all that kind of stuff, that kind of witching history, which is very fun. So yeah, really, really cool. And it's not going to be your sort of perhaps our stereotypes of witches. It's not going to be like how we presume witches to be. It's definitely goes into the sort of actual facts of things. So yeah, very, very cool and worth looking at for sure. That's the kind of historical things of the past. Modern times, we have the rather provocative Witches, Sluts and Feminists, and this is a really cool book at different perspectives. There's various different authors within here, and they talk about their experiences of all sorts of things. And it's very much sex positive. It talks about things like racism and oppression. So really goes into the detail of why witchcraft is so often weaponised against women and people who aren't in necessarily traditional positions of power. And it obviously here, political witch, rebellion and revolution. I would argue that witchcraft is inherently political. And and I think it's very cool to look back at different perspectives here. This is a really good one. It actually mentions Carol F. Carlson's book, Devil in the Shape of a Woman. Very, very good to see the true parts of Salem's history. It's not all this whole grand daughters you couldn't burn thing, although that has an important place in feminist circles. Historically, iffy. So yeah, a cool book to read if you're looking for a bit of a nice activism and really kind of getting out there in terms of pushing the boundaries of things. So yeah, cool to check out in terms of sort of modern takes on witchcraft and using it as a force for good. Now, one of the books that's come out just recently and that I've just finished reading and I highly recommend is Rebel Witch by Kellyanne Maddox. I'm going to do a proper review of this because it's actually probably one of the more important releases that's happened in recent times in terms of witching. There's so many new books out there that are kind of 101s in a way, but this is actually very helpful for witches who have been practicing for some time. It's an especially healthy way to get into witchcraft, this Rebel Witch. It really emphasises on creating your own path, crafting that, and exploring your reasons for doing different things. And obviously a very beautiful book in terms of what you see here. It's got fantastic elements to it inside as well. So if I find a lovely, so these kind of sigil-like illustrations, and it has a statement of power each time. It's also, in terms of the text, very handily sized, and I love the font. It's also written in the way that Kelly and Maddox speaks. I recommend their channel, and it's great, approachable. Yeah, I'm going to do a review on this soon. Very, very cool. I'll hopefully do reviews on all sorts of books, but yeah, that one in particularly, I think, needs some attention. Now, I wouldn't be making recommendations without my lovely friends at Secrets of the Cauldron and Alex Reck from Portland Button Works and Portland Button Works Witch Shop. Now, these are witches, real grassroots witches who have done the magical thing, and if you're looking for a witchy planner, Secrets of the Cauldron, and that's made up of Cheryl Kerr Tarot and Geordie Witch, you can find on Instagram. They've made a planner that is path neutral, that doesn't assume really anything about your craft. It teaches you lots of fundamentals as well as giving you some great ideas, and it goes through the sort of what they call the waxing year. And I thought that was a great concept and a great idea of going about the whole sort of idea of that energy building and then releasing. So yeah, very much a helpful tome. It's got some great prompts in there for each month, and it's also got these lovely illustrations too, which I really dig. Yeah, really love that. And what I love at the back, which is a real bonus actually, and I carry this around me quite frequently because it's just so full of correspondences, and my memory is not the best. So what you have at the back is all these different parts to look at, to incorporate. I mean, look at the sheer amount of detail of that. They haven't asked me to do a review or anything like that. I've reviewed it a few times over the time that's been out, and each time is a joy because it's just such a great book. This is a really helpful thing. It's worth recording your spells and writing down the results so you can hopefully repeat the good stuff. But yeah, I think it's really important to support each other as witches, and so these two witches, off their own backs, made this brilliant thing. And yeah, as I say, it's so good because when your friend makes something, you want to encourage them, and then when they make something that's really good, you're like, oh yes, I'm so pleased. This is just perfect. So an actual really good addition. They're doing a waning year coming up soon, so that's exciting. So you can find them on secretsofthecauldron.co.uk. So yeah, highly, highly recommend. And Alex Reck, as I said, Portland Button Works, I always link both Secrets of the Cauldron and Portland Button Works in my description boxes. Again, I really want to support witches out there who are perhaps not the sort of mainstream kind of witches. Now, they've written a couple of zines, or they've written more than a couple, but these are their witching zines. Very, very cool. And this looks at secular witchcraft, a very specific path, and it really opens up quite a nice sort of personal take on things. Very sort of very intriguing, very almost vulnerable in a way in terms of how open it is. You get this real perspective of this wonderful person, their path, and how they're going about it. Really, really cool, and I just love the handmadeness of it. Speaking of which, the DIY witchery, the Dabbler's Week. This was actually written in response to that really annoying article that was by some journalist somewhere who wrote, and the title of it was, I became a witch for a week and the results were worrying, some clickbaity thing. And essentially what they've done is got a self-care book on witchcraft and gone with that and assumed that was the whole thing, and wrote a very sort of sceptical, scathing, really kind of snarky review, and yeah. But the response to that was, how could you become a witch for a week? How would you go about that? And so turning it into a positive, Alex Reck wrote this, and it's just got some great, wonderful ideas in there that I really, really adore. It reminds me very much of Tank Girl and that kind of vibe. So yeah, really dig it, and it actually gives you a great start. So if you want to start into the witching, you mentioned sigils here, start into the witchcraft, and you want to do it in a week, give it a go, dabble in it, then this is definitely the one for you. So yeah, links in the description box. And speaking of links, if you've got anything that you would really recommend in terms of books, in terms of, any kind of information that you've come across, pop it in the comments. It's really, really great to share information and try and get it out there and support any witches. If you've got any witches who, you particularly are keen on, that you think need a bit of a boost. And if there's any subjects that I haven't covered here, there's a couple I haven't done deliberately because I'm still reading certain books on them. But yeah, feel free. Anything you want to know, or want a book recommendation on, I will certainly research into it if I haven't done so already. And yeah, as I say, share things out. I just want to say also a big thank you to all you subscribers. We've hit 300 now, and that's just crazy to me because, I didn't think this would get past, 5 or 10. So it's awesome that you are so wonderfully kind as to subscribe and interact and like and all those things. Do come over to Instagram. I'm going to be doing Witch Quote of the Month. It was Witch Quote of the Week, but in terms of the channel, I need to balance my workload. And speaking of which, these videos are probably going to come out once every 2 weeks. If I can do little bonus videos, they won't have a magical thing to do, and then there'll probably just be a little chat or a review or something like that. But I just need to balance, because I'm a working witch, need to balance sort of work-life balance and this too. So yeah, so hit me up on Instagram at Do The Magical Thing. Please subscribe if you haven't already, much appreciated. Share the channel in any witchy groups you're in, and yeah, we've done the magical theory, let's do the magical thing. Okay, witches, here's our magical thing to do. It's really simple this time because I've chewed your ear off enough about books. But what we're going to do is gather some books together from our own witchy library, whether that's, ebooks or physical books. And we want to have a flick to the back of them and just see what it is they're recommending or what is in their bibliographies. And really, books that have a bibliography are a good sign because it shows they've done some research and that they have some things to offer you as further reading. Now, when we're looking through these, what we're looking for is any kind of repeated tomes from, different books. Maybe they're mentioning the same kind of thing. And that's a good idea, that text might be a primary source or a primary text that really a lot of different practitioners or a lot of different paths have used as inspiration. And you can go to that as as an opportunity to really get your own interpretation on these sort of primary texts. For instance, in spellcrafting here, they have recommended Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, which is really considered a primary text, especially in the Western tradition. With popular magic, this one being a more academic text, you can benefit from the bibliography of definitely kind of more specific, more individual, perhaps rarer things that you might want to research. And the good thing about these being older and more specific things is that you can either find them in particular libraries or online, and you can often find them in PDF form. Or if you have access to like a university or a museum or something like that, you might be able to see them on there. So these are a good opportunity for coming across anything that's out of copyright that you can kind of come across, in a PDF format. And yeah, so this just gives you some options to make a short list of the videos, or not the videos, of the books that you really like. Obviously, you could do it with videos too, to be fair. You could do it with any kind of particular documentaries or any channels that you particularly want to dig into. But getting back to the book side of things, what you're looking for is to make a list of these primary texts that you come across, these repeated texts, or just any that really interest you. And you can divide it into things like practical magic or herb magic. You could divide it into 101s or to historical magic. And then, as we mentioned in, I think it was our first video, about having 13 phases of in a year, you could assign a book to each moon phase and read it for that particular time period, and then perhaps write your notes when it hits the full moon. Just some options for you, as I say, very brief, but making the most. I really think one of the best parts of a book is the bibliography, because it gives you that opportunity to learn some more. Well, until next time, health and wealth.